I watched my mother slide the document across the polished mahogany conference table, her manicured fingers trembling slightly. "Just sign it, Chloe," she whispered, her voice laced with a fragile, performative sorrow. "Your sister needs this. We all do. Don't make this more difficult than it has to be." Across from her, my older sister Vanessa crossed her arms, glaring at me with deep entitlement. "She's just being difficult, Mom," Vanessa snapped, her voice cutting through the quiet office. "She's always been a bitter, ungrateful parasite. We gave her a roof over her head during college, and now she wants to ruin my family's future because she has a pathetic little grudge." The air in the room was thick with the scent of Eleanor's expensive French perfume, a smell that for most of my life had triggered an immediate sense of dread in my chest. Today it did nothing to me. I am 26 years old. I am a licensed corporate attorney, sitting in a corporate boardroom where they still see me as the weak, penniless girl they successfully manipulated for years. What my mother and Vanessa didn't realize was that I was no longer under their thumb. They brought me here today because they desperately needed $5 million released from my late grandfather's inheritance trust. Because of a hidden legal clause they had completely misunderstood, the bank wouldn't release a single cent without my fields of compliance being met, requiring my unanimous co-trustee signature. They thought this meeting was a mere formality, a moment where they could bully the family scapegoat one last time into doing their bidding. They truly believed I would fold under the weight of their familiar heavy guilt. But as I looked at the amendment designed to strip away my rights, I felt completely calm. The emotional exhaustion that used to consume me was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, detached clarity. I picked up my expensive fountain pen, turned it over in my fingers, and then slowly placed it down on the table, completely unsigned. I leaned back and looked directly into my mother's eyes, watching the color begin to drain from her face as the silence stretched between us, heavy and unyielding. If you've ever felt like the invisible person in your own family, used only for what you could provide, please take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and share your experience in the comments. Your support helps share these testimonies of healing and justice. Looking at my mother's tightening jaw, I realized how surreal it was that I was now the absolute gatekeeper of their financial survival. But to understand how I went from being their exhausted, unpaid babysitter to the woman holding all the power, I need to take you back to where the trap first began. Growing up, my family lived by a strict, unwritten script. My mother, Eleanor, and my enabling father, Richard, cared about one thing above all else: their high society public image. To the outside world, we were a wealthy, harmonious family of status. But behind closed doors, our household operated on a cruel, deeply entrenched dynamic. Vanessa was the golden child. She was beautiful, popular, and entirely coddled. Her every whim was funded without question, her continuous mistakes were swept under the rug, and she was taught that the universe owed her a luxurious living. Then there was me, Chloe. I was the scapegoat, treated like an afterthought and an inconvenience whose only value lay in what I could provide for everyone else. Vanessa married young to a man with wealthy tastes but a shallow bank account. Within 2 years she had 2 children, Leo and Lily, and immediately expected our parents, and the world, to cater to her new, overwhelming lifestyle. The real turning point came when I turned 18. I had worked myself to the bone in high school, studying late into the night, and finally received an acceptance letter into a prestigious local university. I remember showing the letter to my parents at the dinner table, my heart pounding with hope. My mother didn't even look up from her plate. Richard sighed, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and told me flatly that they wouldn't be paying a single dime for my tuition, my books, or my housing. When I asked why, Eleanor casually explained that they had already spent my entire college fund to finance Vanessa's lavish, 6-figure destination wedding. Vanessa didn't just want a wedding, she wanted a spectacle to cement her status, and my parents gladly sacrificed my future to buy her that moment. I was left completely stranded, staring into a financial abyss while Vanessa smirked from across the table. My parents then presented me with a single choice, a trap disguised as a generous favor. They told me I could live at home for free to save money, but it came with a heavy, unspoken condition that would alter the next 4 years of my life. How could I have known back then that their version of a free room would cost me my absolute sanity? The agreement was simple on paper, but in reality, it was an absolute nightmare. The moment I moved my things into my childhood bedroom, my parents stopped treating me like a daughter and began treating me like an indentured servant. I quickly became the designated full-time nanny for Vanessa's two toddlers, Leo and Lily. Vanessa and her husband lived just 10 minutes away, but they practically lived at our house, dropping the kids off at a moment's notice without a single shred of consideration for my schedule. My daily routine was brutal. I would wake up at 5 in the morning, pack lunches for the kids, feed them breakfast, and then rush to my university campus for a full day of rigorous classes. The moment my last lecture ended, I couldn't join study groups or participate in campus life. I had to sprint to my car and drive straight back home because Vanessa had a brunch, a yoga class, or a last-minute date night planned. While Vanessa and her husband went on weekend getaways and beach vacations, I spent my nights changing diapers, wiping down counters, and rocking crying toddlers to sleep. My education was treated as an annoying little hobby. I vividly remember sitting at the small desk in my room, trying to read a dense legal textbook for an exam the next morning. My mother would barge in without knocking, snatch the book out of my hands, and scream at me. "Vanessa is exhausted, Chloe. Stop being so incredibly selfish and go help your sister with the laundry. Living here isn't free." The emotional cruelty was woven into the smallest daily interactions. On Friday nights, the entire family would gather in the dining room to celebrate Vanessa's minor achievements, like hitting 1,000 followers on her social media page. I was strictly excluded from sitting at the table. I was told to stay in the kitchen, listening to their laughter through the door while I ate cold leftovers out of a plastic container. The deprivation extended to my professional future. I missed crucial networking seminars and career fairs because Vanessa demanded a last-minute evening out, and Eleanor threatened to throw me onto the street if I refused to babysit. But the ultimate breaking point came on my graduation day. I graduated with highest honors, a testament to the sleepless nights I spent studying by the glow of my cell phone. When I walked across the stage and looked out into the crowd, my parents' seats were completely empty. They had skipped my graduation entirely to attend the grand opening of Vanessa's new lifestyle boutique. Standing alone in my cap and gown, swallowed by a sea of proud families, something inside me permanently hardened. I realized my birth family would never love me, and I vowed that they would never have the chance to break me again. What my parents and Vanessa didn't know was that while they were busy exploiting my labor, I was quietly building the foundation of their ultimate undoing. They truly believed I was trapped, a penniless student completely dependent on their charity. But I possessed a secret life they knew absolutely nothing about. Before college even began, I had secured a prestigious, merit-based academic scholarship that completely covered my tuition and books. I never told them. I let them believe I was burying myself in student loans, knowing that if they found out I had a full ride, they would demand I pay them rent or hand over the excess funds to finance Vanessa's lifestyle. Furthermore, those long nights when they thought I was merely hiding in my bedroom or working a low-wage retail job, I was actually working remotely as a paid legal researcher for one of the top corporate law firms in the city. The managing partner had reviewed an essay I published in a legal journal and offered me a position. Every single dollar I earned was quietly deposited into a private bank account at an entirely different bank, one my mother didn't even know existed. While I was folding Vanessa's laundry and scrubbing her dishes, my savings account was steadily growing into 5 figures. After graduating college, I used my secret savings to pay for law school entirely on my own. I moved out of my parents' house the very next day, renting a tiny studio apartment across town. I kept my communications with them minimal, brief, and deliberately vague. I let them continue to believe the narrative they had constructed for me, that I was a struggling, low-earning failure who barely scraped by. When Eleanor called to mock my tiny apartment, I simply agreed with her, letting her think she was right. In reality, I excelled in law school, graduated in the top 3% of my class, and was immediately hired as a junior associate at the prestigious firm where I had researched for years. I was earning a 6-figure salary, building a reputation for meticulous contract analysis, and securing my financial independence before I even turned 26. I hid my professional success completely, knowing their greed would instantly target my income if they discovered the truth. My family's financial house of cards was quietly rotting from their reckless lifestyle, while my own foundation was rock solid. But I couldn't have survived those dark, lonely years entirely alone. In the shadows of my isolation, there was one extraordinary woman who truly saw me, and she was about to hand me the ultimate key to my freedom. Aunt Evelyn was the only person who kept me grounded during those suffocating years. She was my late grandfather's older sister, an elegant, sharp-witted woman who lived in a modest, sunlit house filled from floor to ceiling with classic literature and the comforting aroma of jasmine tea. While my mother spun her webs of social perfection and Vanessa demanded the world bow to her, Aunt Evelyn quietly opened her front door to me. Her home became my true sanctuary. When the screaming at my parents' house grew too loud, or when I was too exhausted to breathe, I would sit at her kitchen table. She would push a plate of warm biscuits toward me, look into my eyes and say, "Blood is just an accident of birth, Chloe. Family is chosen through love, respect, and how they protect your soul. Don't let them make you feel small." Evelyn didn't just save my sanity, she handed me the blueprint for my protection. She had a profound understanding of our family's financial history, and she knew exactly how much my grandfather had distrusted his own daughter, Eleanor. Before he passed, he had watched how they sidelined me and he despised their reckless, superficial lifestyle. Evelyn quietly arranged a private meeting for me with his old, trusted estate lawyer, Mr. Vance. Sitting in Mr. Vance's quiet office during my second year of law school, he slid a certified copy of my grandfather's original irrevocable trust documents across the desk. As my eyes scanned the precise legal terminology, my breath caught. The trust was explicitly designed to safeguard the core family estate from Eleanor and Vanessa's insatiable spending. It contained an absolute ironclad stipulation. Upon my 25th birthday, I was automatically instated as a primary co-trustee. No capital could be liquidated, and no amendments could be made to alter distributions without my unanimous written signature. Aunt Evelyn had looked at me with a knowing, fierce smile that day. Months later, as I advanced in my career, she called me with a quiet warning. "They are running through their remaining capital at an alarming rate, Chloe. Vanessa's boutique is hemorrhaging money, and Eleanor is desperate to maintain appearances. Soon the well will run dry and they will come looking for you. Be ready." The storm Aunt Evelyn predicted arrived exactly 3 weeks after my 26th birthday. Vanessa, utterly oblivious to her own financial reality, decided she needed to purchase a sprawling multi-million-dollar estate in an exclusive gated community. She insisted a larger home was essential to cement her status as a premier high-society influencer, completely ignoring the fact that her lifestyle boutique was drowning in unpaid vendor invoices. To fund the staggering down payment, my mother and father concocted a reckless plan to tap into my grandfather's primary trust fund. Because they had spent decades controlling every aspect of my life, they blindly assumed the money was theirs for the taking and that I would simply do whatever I was told. To celebrate this grand illusion, Eleanor organized a lavish dinner party at Le Petit Miroir, an incredibly upscale, jacket-required French restaurant downtown. They invited 20 of their wealthiest family friends, prominent local business owners, and extended relatives to publicly announce Vanessa's spectacular new home acquisition. True to their long-established patterns of cruelty, I didn't receive a formal invitation. Instead, at 9 o'clock the night before the dinner, my phone buzzed with a curt text message from my mother. "We need you at the restaurant by 5:30 p.m. tomorrow. Vanessa's nanny canceled, and we need you to manage Leo and Lily in the private side room so the adults can socialize without being disturbed. Wear something plain so you don't stand out." In the past, a message like that would have left me crying in my apartment, wounded by the deliberate exclusion. But this time I looked down at my phone and felt a slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. I immediately called Aunt Evelyn, who agreed that the time had come. I texted my mother back a simple, concise answer: "I'll be there." They thought they were setting up another night of using me as their free, invisible labor while they basked in stolen glory. They had no idea they were confidently marching straight into a legal trap of their own design. The next evening, I carefully dressed in a breathtaking, tailored silk emerald dress, a quiet nod to my financial and professional success. But before leaving my apartment, I slipped a heavy, oversized, mundane winter coat over it, completely concealing my elegance. I grabbed my leather briefcase containing the original trust restrictions, took a deep, steadying breath, and drove toward the restaurant, knowing the fragile illusion of my family's power was about to shatter. The crystal chandeliers of Le Petit Miroir cast a warm, glittering light over the main dining room, but the atmosphere felt entirely freezing the moment I stepped inside. I hadn't even taken 3 steps past the hostess stand before my mother appeared, her eyes scanning me with immediate disapproval. She looked at my heavy, unpretentious winter coat and sighed with deep irritation. "Thank goodness you're finally here," she whispered sharply, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the entryway. "Vanessa's children are already fussing in the private alcove down the hall. Go back there and stay with them. And leave that bulky coat on if what's underneath looks like what you usually wear. We have very important guests tonight, Chloe. Try not to embarrass us." I didn't argue. I simply nodded, walked down the corridor to the side room and greeted my niece and nephew. I ordered them some chicken fingers, set up their coloring books and made sure they were content. Once they settled down, I walked back out to the main banquet table, quietly taking an empty seat at the absolute far end, right next to the swinging kitchen doors where the family had designated me to sit. There were 20 people seated around the long white-clothed table, wealthy neighbors, local business owners and prominent high society friends. Throughout the first 2 courses I was completely invisible. My parents and Vanessa didn't introduce me, nor did they look my way. Instead, the entire room revolved around Vanessa, who was loudly describing the imported marble countertops and custom walk-in closets of the estate she had chosen. Then Eleanor stood up, tapping her crystal wine glass with a silver spoon. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate our beautiful Vanessa's incredible success," my mother began, her voice dripping with performative maternal pride. She spoke at length about Vanessa's brilliant eye for design and her lifestyle boutique. Then her eyes drifted down to the far end of the table, locking onto me. A tight, patronizing smile formed on her lips. "And of course we have to give a special mention to our Chloe. She's our perennial student, still trying to find her footing in the world. But she has truly found her calling these past few years as our reliable, completely free babysitter. We truly couldn't have funded Vanessa's dreams without Chloe keeping the home fires burning for zero cost." A ripple of polite, uncomfortable laughter echoed through the room. Vanessa smirked triumphantly, lifting her champagne glass toward me in a mock toast. I sat completely still, my heart rate steady, watching the display with a detached, icy calm that completely unnerved my mother for a split second. Richard then stood up, proudly announcing that the multi-million-dollar contract was signed, and they were closing on the house by the end of the week. As the guests applauded, Eleanor walked down to my end of the table. Under the cover of the heavy tablecloth, she forcefully shoved a thick manila envelope into my lap. "Sign these routine bank papers right now, Chloe," she whispered, her eyes flashing with a dangerous, demanding intensity. "The wire transfer needs to clear by tomorrow morning. Don't you dare ruin this night for your sister." I excused myself calmly, holding the heavy manila envelope firmly against my side as I walked toward the restaurant's quiet, marble-lined restroom. I locked myself inside a private stall, placed the envelope on the small vanity and pulled out the legal documents. My heart didn't race. Instead, my years of rigorous legal training instantly took over. As a licensed corporate attorney, I didn't just skim the pages. I analyzed them line by line. What I found was a jaw-dropping display of legal desperation. These were not routine bank papers. This was an explicit, aggressively worded amendment designed to completely dissolve the safety clauses my grandfather had established in the original irrevocable trust. If I signed this document, I would be voluntarily relinquishing my status as a co-trustee, handing absolute, unchecked financial authority over to Eleanor, and legally authorizing the immediate transfer of $4 million directly to Vanessa. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces fell perfectly into place. My family was in a state of absolute legal panic. In their boundless arrogance, they had already signed a binding, non-refundable purchase contract for Vanessa's multi-million-dollar mansion without securing the funds first. They had blindly assumed they could bully me into signing just like they used to during my college years. If I didn't sign this amendment tonight, the bank would reject the wire transfer, the property contract would default, and they would instantly lose their massive, six-figure non-refundable deposit, effectively plunging them into total financial ruin. A cold sense of empowerment washed over me. I pulled out my phone, took crystal-clear, high-resolution screenshots of every single page, and securely emailed them to Mr. Vance and Aunt Evelyn. Within 2 minutes, my phone buzzed with an immediate text from Mr. Vance. "This is highly irregular and legally predatory. Do not sign. They have no legal recourse to force you." A second text from Aunt Evelyn arrived right after. "Stand firm, my brave girl. The truth is on your side." Just as I tucked my phone away, Loud, aggressive knocking rattled the restroom door. "Chloe." Eleanor's voice hissed from the other side, sharp and trembling with hidden fury. "What on earth is taking you so long? Stop hiding in there like a child and finish your family duty. We have a room full of important guests waiting for us to finish this transaction." I didn't answer right away. I calmly unbuttoned my heavy, mundane winter coat and draped it over my arm, revealing the stunning, flawless emerald silk dress underneath. I adjusted my posture, standing tall and proud. I unlocked the door, stepped out, and looked down at my startled mother with an expression of absolute, unyielding resolve. I was entirely ready to act. I walked back into the private dining room, but I didn't return to the isolated chair by the kitchen doors. Instead, I walked directly to the head of the long table, standing right between my mother and my sister. The room fell quiet as the guests noticed my posture, my emerald silk dress catching the light of the chandeliers. I calmly placed the manila envelope down on the crisp white tablecloth. It was completely unsigned. "Chloe, what are you doing?" Eleanor whispered, her teeth gritted as she tried to maintain her smile for the guests. "Take your seat and hand over the papers." "I am not signing this amendment," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, cutting through the background music of the restaurant. Eleanor's performative smile instantly vanished. She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "How dare you?" she hissed, abandoning all pretense of high society elegance. "You ungrateful, selfish little brat. Your sister needs this money for her home. After everything we have done for you, providing you a roof over your head while you wasted time at university, this is how you repay us? You are trying to ruin Vanessa's life out of pure, pathetic jealousy." Vanessa joined in, her face contorting with anger. "Look at her, Mom. She's always been bitter. She can't stand to see me succeed. She's just a failed, broke babysitter trying to flex power she doesn't have." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I opened my leather briefcase, pulled out my slim corporate laptop, and connected it to the high-definition smart screen on the wall, a monitor the restaurant usually reserved for corporate presentations. With a few swift clicks, I projected the original terms of my grandfather's irrevocable trust directly onto the wall for every single guest to see. Right beside it, I displayed my active state bar license and my official corporate associate profile from the city's top-tier law firm. The room went completely dead silent. The wealthy neighbors and business owners stared at the screen, their mouths slightly open. "I am not a failed, broke babysitter," I said, looking directly at the stunned guests. "I am a licensed corporate attorney. And for the past 4 years my parents and sister used me as completely unpaid labor, threatening to throw me out if I didn't raise Vanessa's children while they emptied my own college fund to pay for a destination wedding. They lied to me and they lied to all of you." I turned back to my mother, whose face had gone completely, horrifyingly pale. Vanessa looked as if she had been struck by lightning, her arrogant posture totally collapsing. "My grandfather knew exactly who you were, Eleanor," I said calmly, packing my laptop back into my briefcase. "He built this trust to protect his life savings from your reckless greed. I am the co-trustee, and I will never authorize the liquidation of this estate to fund a lifestyle you haven't earned." Eleanor reached out, her hands shaking as she tried to grab my arm, her voice switching to a desperate panic. "Chloe, please, we can talk about this." I stepped back, looking at her with absolute detachment. "You did not give me a free place to live. You traded my dignity for free labor. I owe you absolutely nothing. And from this moment on, you no longer have a daughter." I turned around and walked out of the silent room, the heavy doors closing behind me on the ruins of their illusions. The fallout from that night was immediate, calculated, and entirely devastating for my family. Because I steadfastly refused to sign the trust amendment, the $5 million remained completely locked and untouchable within the bank's secure repository. My grandfather's stipulations held firm, and no amount of screaming or crying from Eleanor could change the legal reality I had enforced. Without access to the trust funds, Vanessa's glamorous dream instantly transformed into a financial nightmare. She was forced to default on the multi-million-dollar purchase contract for the gated estate. Because the contract was binding and unconditional, she completely lost her entire $200,000 non-refundable earnest money deposit. For a couple whose wealth was entirely based on appearances, losing that much liquid cash was a fatal blow. Vanessa became an instant laughingstock among the high society peers she had spent years trying to impress. But the damage went much deeper than a defaulted house contract. To secure the temporary bridge loan for Vanessa's massive deposit, Richard and Eleanor had quietly and illegally leveraged the equity of their own residential home, blindly operating under the assumption that my signature was a guaranteed formality. With the trust money permanently locked, they were left holding a predatory, massive high-interest debt that they had absolutely no means of paying back. Within months, their own home was pushed to the absolute brink of foreclosure. Simultaneously, Vanessa's luxury lifestyle boutique, which had been secretly hemorrhaging cash for over a year, abruptly collapsed. Eleanor could no longer afford to secretly subsidize the failing business with credit cards. The boutique filed for bankruptcy, its windows boarded up, leaving Vanessa and her husband with nothing but mounting debts. They were forced to sell their luxury vehicles and downsize into a cramped two-bedroom rental apartment on the far edge of the city. Socially, the destruction was total. The 20 influential guests who sat at that dinner table did not keep quiet. The story of how Eleanor and Richard had exploited their youngest daughter, only to be publicly and legally dismantled by her, spread like wildfire through their affluent social circle. Country club memberships were quietly dropped, invitations to annual galas ceased entirely, and the high society friends they valued more than their own flesh and blood completely abandoned them. They were left isolated in the wreckage of their own greed, desperate and furious, plotting one final pathetic attempt to force me back into the role they had designed for me. In the weeks that followed that fateful dinner, my phone became a battleground of desperate manipulation. The arrogant demands and furious insults vanished, replaced overnight by a calculating, performative grief. My mother began leaving frantic, weeping voicemails at all hours of the night. Her voice, once so sharp and commanding, was now pathetic and trembling. She tried every classic guilt trip in the narcissistic playbook. She claimed that my father's health was rapidly failing due to the stress of their financial collapse, and that Vanessa's children Leo and Lily were suffering because they had to move out of their home. "Family is supposed to forgive, Chloe," she sobbed into the receiver. "We made mistakes, but we love you. How can you be so cold to your own blood?" Vanessa, too, attempted to breach my defenses. She sent a lengthy, meticulously crafted text message that wore the mask of a genuine apology. She wrote about how much she missed our sisterly bond, but the true motive quickly revealed itself in the final paragraphs. She shamelessly asked me for a private six-figure personal loan from my corporate earnings to help them avoid immediate foreclosure on our parents' house. If they had done this to me years ago, the guilt would have broken me. I would have folded, apologizing for causing trouble, and handed over my boundaries to buy their temporary love. But I was no longer that wounded girl. Thanks to intensive therapeutic work and the unwavering, steady support of Aunt Evelyn, I recognized their words for exactly what they were: empty strategies designed to pull me back into their burning house. I chose not to reply to a single message. I blocked their numbers, restricted their social media access, and maintained an ironclad wall of absolute no contact. The final, pathetic act of retaliation occurred when Eleanor showed up unannounced at my law firm's high-security corporate office. She demanded to see me, loudly telling the receptionist that she was my mother. I walked out into the lobby, looked at her frantic, disheveled appearance, and felt nothing but a quiet pity. I didn't argue and I didn't create a scene. I simply turned to the building security guard and said, "This person does not have an appointment. Please escort her off the premises." I walked back to my office without looking back, permanently sealing the boundary. With the final strings of their chaos permanently severed, my life opened up into a beautiful, unfamiliar expansiveness. True emotional justice didn't mean watching my family suffer. It meant building a life so full of peace and purpose that their cruelty no longer had any power over my mind. Professionally, my dedication paid off. Within a year of the confrontation, I was promoted to a senior associate position at my corporate firm, a milestone that came with a significant salary increase and the deep respect of my peers. I used my hard-earned financial success to purchase a beautiful sunlit condominium overlooking the city park. It became my absolute sanctuary, a space filled with lush green plants, towering bookshelves, and a quiet tranquility that I had never known during my childhood. There were no shouting voices echoing through the halls, no demands for uncompensated labor, and no heavy clouds of conditional approval. I also nurtured my true chosen family. Aunt Evelyn became a frequent guest at my new dining table, her warm laughter filling the rooms as we drank jasmine tea and discussed philosophy. I surrounded myself with a close-knit circle of genuine friends, supportive colleagues, and loving mentors who valued me simply for exactly who I was, not for what I could produce or provide for them. For the first time in my 26 years, I learned what it truly felt like to be seen, respected, and loved unconditionally for my mind and my heart. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening as the sun sets over the city, I look back at the young girl I used to be. I remember the absolute exhaustion of standing over a sink full of Vanessa's dirty dishes, tears blurring my vision while I desperately memorized legal statutes by the dim glow of my cell phone flashlight. I don't look back on her with sadness anymore. I look back on her with a profound, overwhelming gratitude for her resilience. She didn't give up on herself. She stayed patient, she prepared quietly in the dark, and she fiercely believed in her own human worth when everyone else treated her like an inconvenient afterthought. To anyone listening who is currently trapped in the suffocating cycle of a toxic family dynamic, swallowed by the painful roles of a golden child and an ignored scapegoat, please know that blood is never an obligation to endure abuse. Your life belongs entirely to you and you have the right to protect it. Winning doesn't require a loud, dramatic vengeance. It requires the quiet, unbreakable courage to gather your evidence, know your legal rights, build your independence in the shadows, and walk away into the light of your own self-worth. True freedom is the ultimate, beautiful peace you build on the other side of your boundaries, and it is a victory that no one can ever take away from you.